Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
All right, welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. I am, as always, your host, and it looks like we got a really big crowd tonight. I'm glad to see that. So thank you very much for joining me. Today is photo Q&A. All right. So whatever questions you happen to have on your mind, this is your chance to hopefully get some answers.
Got one.
You got, yes, that's
Yes,
right.
yes, I told you.
Bill sent me an email or a message letting me know that he had this question. And I said, perfect. Don't forget to remind me. Before we get into it though, I had a private lesson today with one of my students, a one-to-one lesson here at the studio. And I think she was on here last week, Pallavi. You probably have seen her in the on the Zoom meet. She might be joining us later. She wasn't feeling good by the time she left here, so she may be out. But during our conversation, one of the things that came up is as I was trying to instruct her, I'm so used to using a certain language when talking to photographers. And it was a language that she wasn't quite familiar with because she's new to photography and she's really dedicated to learning it and pushing herself to hopefully for herself climb up to that step where she can start charging for her photos. She wants to be a professional photographer. She's more interested in, portraits and pets and things like that. Not quite what I do. But so I was throwing out these terms and she was looking at me cross-eyed, and then I had to take a step back and say, okay, I got to watch what I say. But one of the things that I stress to her is that if you are going to get any kind of seriousness with photography, you need to start learning the lingo. So that way, when you talk to other photographers, you can both be on the same page without having to do a lot of explanations. All right. The reason I bring that up is because I am also in a couple of photo groups on Facebook that I chime in every so often. And what I find is that whenever somebody asks for help in anything, part of the barrier that prevents them from really understanding some of the feedback that gets back to them is that they don't understand the language. So what ends up happening is somebody will give an opinion about how to make their image better, and all of a sudden they're responding back, well, what do you mean by such and such? Whatever that term is. So now the person has to go back and explain what they mean by that term. So one of the things that I want to stress today, and it's something that you can do on your own over time, is pay attention to some of the terminology that is used in photography and try to understand it in order to be able to communicate more effectively with fellow photographers and just, the general photography community. And also just for your own knowledge, when you are, possibly watching tutorials on Facebook or on YouTube, or reading something in a book, you understand the terminology and you can then say, okay, that makes sense, and you now start putting the pieces together. So that's my little tip for the day.
Doc, I have a question on that.
Sure.
That you brought it up. I have to give a speech in a couple of weeks about photojournalism, because Flagpole found out about it at North Haven, that I did that in North Haven. They wanted to know if I wanted to do it there. Question regarding shutter speed, 1/200th of a second. When I'm telling someone they should use 1/200th of a second, should I say 1/200th of a second or say shutter speed 200? Because the camera actually says 200.
Correct. So, part of the thing that you have to understand, Bill, is that when you are presenting, you're being placed in a higher level. So it's not so much peer to peer as it is instructor to student. So there's a certain onus put on you to be a little bit more precise and clear with your language so that the people who are listening to you fully understand. Okay? And this gets tricky because obviously when we are presenting to a group, we really don't know what levels everybody is. So it's tough because what I find is I don't want to dumb down my language to the lowest common denominator because, you know, the majority of the people in the group are above that level. All right. But I also don't want to go too technical that it leaves the younger, and I mean younger by degree of understanding of photography, not by age. The younger photographers, it kind of leaves them behind because they may not be fully aware. So what I try to do is things that should be common knowledge. So for example, your example, where you're talking about the exposure triangle, this should be core fundamental information that everybody should have. So the trick is for you to be consistent with how you present it. So if you start off saying 1/200th of a second, continue it through all your explanations. So every time you refer to shutter, you're going to refer to it as a fraction. Okay? If it's more comfortable for you as a speaker to refer it as 200th of a second, then, you know, as long as you keep it consistent, people will understand. Okay?
I always prefer to say 1/60th of a second or 1/200th of a second.
Right.
Because we are talking fractions.
Correct.
People know the difference between a fraction and 1 second, a half a second, whatever.
Right.
And I feel that's
and with that reasoning, you know, whenever you refer to aperture, it's always preceded by f 4.5, f8. Okay. And of course ISO. That way people understand. But the thing is for you to remain consistent. Mm-hmm. All right. And that's the trick. So, you know, to answer your question, yeah, I don't think the nuance between saying 200th of a second or 1/200th of a second is minor as long as you keep it consistent. Yeah. All right. Where I would caution you is if you are going into highly technical verbiage that may not be understood by everybody, then you might want to, when you say it the first time, kind of explain what you mean. Okay. For example, I know you're doing the photojournalism thing, but let's say I'm doing a workshop on portraiture. Okay. Any of you who've done any kind of portrait lighting studies knows that when you're working with multiple lights around your subject, a lot of times those lights are given a specific term based on their function and based on their position to the model. But the thing is, a lot of those terms tend to be fluid. Okay. So for example, if somebody says main light and key light, two different terms, same thing. Okay. Hair light, kicker light, edge light, rim light. All right. All do the same thing. All right. So this is where it gets tricky. If you use a certain term for a certain light and you refer to that light, keep that term the same. Otherwise, people get confused. It says, well, he mentioned hair light. Now he's saying a rim light. Is that a different light? All right. So you don't want to introduce ambiguity in your lesson. So you just got to be careful with picking the word that explains what you're trying to say, and then just keep it consistent. So if you refer to a light as a key light, always refer to it as a key light. Okay. And because it is ambiguous, you might say the first time you introduce it, you say, okay, this is my main light. It's also called a key light. So for those of you who know it as a key light, just know that I'm referring to it as a main light, but it's also my key light. You get the explanation, the definition out, and now you can go the rest of the presentation without having to explain it, because now everybody understands when you say main light and they know it as a key light, they know they've made that association and they can then follow what you're saying.
Thank you.
So, but I've sat in on your presentation in the past with North Haven. That's a nice little presentation you got. So good
Thank
for you.
That's gonna be February 9th. I'll plug it again when we get close to February 9th. They asked me to do it, and I was glad to do it because they came in and did a presentation for us, and they have
Nice.
judged for us, and we've judged for them. So
Good. Yeah. Speaking of judging, I had the honor of judging for the Connecticut Scholastic Awards. The Connecticut Scholastics Association is kind of like an umbrella group that oversees the introduction of arts into school systems. So they have a bunch of school systems under their umbrella here in Connecticut. And what they do is they hold an annual competition, a regional one, and then the winners of the regional go on to compete on the national level. And so they approached Milford Photo, asking them to provide a judge, and Jesse threw my name into the hat. And let me tell you, it was an all-day event. There were hundreds of photos in different categories, everything from, what was it, 7th grade to 12th grade. And I was floored, literally floored by some of the quality of these high school students' work. It was very impressive. So I was one of the judges for the photo competition, but along with it, they also have, because it encompasses all the arts, they had drawing, they had three-dimensional design, clay work and pottery and things like that. They had painting, and a few other categories I can't remember. But I got a chance to see some of the finalists for some of those other categories, and man, I was just amazed. But actually, that brings me to another point, because again, referring to posts on social media, if you're involved in any of the photography groups, and Steve is here. Steve ran a photography forum for a number of years. Unfortunately, it's no longer, right, Steve? Yeah. And forums they got their asses kicked by social media, I think. But one of the nice things about photography forums and photography groups on social network is that you can ask the community for feedback on your work. And it's one of the things that if you want to get serious with your work, I really suggest you throwing yourself out to the wolves, so to speak. Put your work out there and ask for critique on your work. But one of the things that I like to tell people is don't just throw it, post an image and say, hey, tell me what you think of this, because, well, you're going to, 100 people respond back, you're going to get 100 different answers. That's not going to help you. The other problem is that a lot of the feedback tends to be very subjective. And there are a lot of trolls out there that all they want to do is they want to tell you that you suck and that you should, sell your camera. And they get their jollies from that. So in one respect, it kind of forces you to start getting a tougher skin about your work. And it's something that you need to do as a professional photographer or even as a semi-pro. Anytime you're going to release your work to the public, you need to build that tougher skin. All right. And realize that whatever is said is not said as a personal attack. Usually, if it's something negative, they're just trying to get a rise out of you. And if it's something positive, okay, that sounds negative, you have to understand how to turn it around to use it as a lesson to improve, okay? And more importantly, when all you get back is attaboys, all right, how helpful is that, okay? The way I liken it to is, remember when you were a kid and you did all these crayon drawings and you brought it home to mom or dad and they go, grandma and grandpa, and they go, oh, this is beautiful. It's the best present I've ever received. And they put it on the refrigerator and they adore it, right? And it makes you feel good. But years later, you look at it and go, oh my God, that was terrible, wasn't it? Okay. Well, it's the same thing. And you have to understand, if you're looking to elevate your photography to a point where you want to release it to the public, you want to maybe make a profit, sell prints, or whatever it is that you want to do, you need to rise to a certain level. And the people that just give you attaboys really are kind of worthless, because it's very easy to say, oh, I love it, it's great, fantastic work, to something that's mediocre. It holds absolutely no meaning, all right? And as good as it may feel to get those attaboys, when you're looking to become, to get to a higher level, you have to understand and come to the grips that those attaboys mean nothing, all right? Where you get the benefit is where you look at a particular piece that you've produced and you say, I understand I'm still learning. I understand that I don't know everything about editing. I don't know everything about composition, whatever it is. All right. What I suggest is, if I analyze your image, be super critical, and say, okay, what do I not like about this particular image? And say, okay, I'm going to put it into public forum, and I'm going to say, I like this, except I think such and such is wrong. Does anybody have any suggestions on how to fix that or how to correct that? Okay. So what happens here is, one, you're limiting the feedback to one specific problem. All right. So hopefully the feedback that comes back to you will help you solve that issue the next time around. Okay? Along the way, somebody may say, oh, this is how I would answer that particular question. But I also noticed this. All right. So you may get a little bonus help in other areas that you may not have thought about. Okay. But getting that feedback that is specifically geared to your problem kind of, corrals everything and keeps it in check. Again, if you send it out, general question, 100 people are going to give you 100 different answers, and that's going to be worthless, because now you don't know what's right, what's wrong, because different people have different ways of working, and they're going to see different things that are wrong with your image. And some are going to give you an answer that really isn't an answer because they're just, unsure. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now I'm going to flip the table. Okay, and I suggest that if you do participate in these groups, put yourself out there and give a critique. All right, give a critique. And you may say to yourself, well, I'm not comfortable. I don't feel I'm at that level where I can give something constructive. Okay. And I would argue that by you offering a critique, you're doing a couple of things. You're forcing yourself to look at an image in a more subjective way, in a more objective way. All right. Because now, instead of just looking at it and giving it that attaboy and say, oh, pretty picture, I wish I had taken it. All right. You're now stopping and say, okay, well, the person has requested help in such and such. All right. And you can look at it and says, okay, how would I approach that problem? Okay. And you may have a solution. All right. And offer your solution. Okay. Or you may look at it and say, well, I don't have a solution, but now I can follow the thread, see what other people offer as a solution, and then possibly learn from that. But by stopping and analyzing that image, okay, you are training your eye to look for and spot certain things, which that skill can turn around and translate to looking at your images with a more objective view, okay, which helps you in your editing. All right. So again, one of the things that I stress with my lessons is when you open up your image, the first thing you should look for is all the obvious things that are wrong that need to be corrected. Okay. When you're first starting out, the more obvious errors tend to really jump at you. Okay. And after a while, you get to these errors become very easy to spot. Okay. Crooked horizon lines, super easy to spot. Color temperature that's off, super easy to spot. Something that's a little bit too contrasty, super easy to spot. Okay. Once you get to that level, you need to step it up another level, and you need to fine-tune your observation skills to something that is less obvious but still a problem. All right. So like some of the lessons that I've been doing with dodging and burning, all right, the steps look very small. And as I'm doing them, you're probably saying to yourself, I don't see much of a difference here. But as soon as I flip the before and after, then all of a sudden it just kind of clicks in and go, aha. All right. I never realized that. All right. So it's those small subtleties that you're now going to start training. Okay. And it's easier to train that eye with somebody else's work than with your own, simply because we have a personal attachment to the work we generate. It's very hard for us to separate from our own work. When we're looking at somebody else's work, there's already that separation. All right. It's not my work. I could care less. All right. It's a pretty picture. Big deal. All right. So there's already that separation. All right. But if we stop and we say, okay, let me analyze it in order to critique it, then we start training our own eye to be a little bit more perceptive, a little bit more subtle, okay, a little bit more discerning. And it's a skill that's going to carry over to your own work, all right? Not only in editing, but also in the image taking, all right? Because, you know, if you have a bad composition, there's no amount of editing that's going to fix bad composition, okay? All right, so anyway, that's my soapbox. Something to for you guys to think about. All right, so let's get to some questions and answers.
Hey, Doug, I have a question.
Sure.
I was shooting hockey through the glass. I thought it was my lens. I thought it was my focus. I focused it manually. It was right on. I took it home. It looked soft.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's the glass because then I took the same lens and shot outside and did the same thing and it was sharp. So that's the only thing I can come with. Is there any way of correcting that?
Okay. So there's a couple of things. Whenever you're photographing anything with a lot of movement, and typically sports is a lot of movement, you need a higher shutter speed in order to be able to freeze the action. If you're a little bit too slow, no matter how good your focus is, the movement's going to blur the image.
It wasn't that.
All right.
I was shooting at 3,000.
Okay. All right.
It wasn't that.
Shooting through the safety plexiglass.
That's what I'm wondering.
So yeah, so when you're shooting through that plexiglass, I mean that's pretty thick plexiglass.
Yeah, that's it.
Depending on your angle of view to the plexiglass, all right, what happens is light coming through that plexiglass is going to bend. All right. You're also going to realize that glass has two sides to it, two surfaces. Okay. I don't have a piece of glass. I don't have any. Oh, well, I'll use this as an example. All right. So here's my plexiglass. All right. So we have one surface and we have the other surface. Okay. And because it's reflective, it's going to reflect off this surface and it's going to reflect off this surface. All right. So whatever let's see, whatever your scene is, okay, you're looking at your scene through a piece of glass that is reflecting that scene here and here. Okay. So if you're dead on to the glass, you're not going to see too much of a difference. As soon as that plexiglass is at an angle, what happens is you're looking through a diffracted image. All right. So what happens is one plane and the other plane go out of phase. Okay.
The pictures look soft.
So what's happening is you're literally taking a picture of three versions of the scene. All right. The actual scene itself, a reflection on the front side of the plexi, and a reflection of the back side of the plexi. Okay. And because your focus is out there, it's not here. All right. So whatever reflection is already going to be soft and out of focus. Right.
I thought of that. I put the lens right up against the glass. And
all right.
A little bit different, but not much.
Yeah, it's if you're up against the plexi, it kind of minimizes it. All right. What I suggest is you get something for the front of your lens that you can put up against the plexi in order to block any light. because any light that hits that plexiglass in front of your lens is still going to reflect back into the lens.
Okay.
So in order to minimize that reflection, get a flexible hood. All right, they make them. They're it's like a hood. All right,
Right.
except they're big cone of rubber. Okay, and you put that up against, and because it's rubber, you can maneuver the camera around, and still like a suction cup up against the glass. Okay, that prevents any light from coming in and reflecting down into the lens and creating that diffraction. That's probably the only things that, all right, the only other thing that might help is to put a polarizer filter on it. But even that, if you're not careful, you're still going to get some, you know, it only cures the problem part of the time. So
Okay, thank
so
you.
hopefully that helps, but that's basically what's happening, and why you're getting that soft view. So all right, Bill has a question.
Yes, I saw a video on how to move your files in Lightroom. How to move your files
Mm-hmm.
in Lightroom, but not how to make a copy onto an external drive as a backup.
Okay.
So what I'm looking to do, what I'm helping somebody to do, is to be able to have the stuff in Lightroom on the main drive or the main external drive, and to have a copy of it on a backup drive. These people work with Lightroom, they don't work with File Manager the way I do. So
Okay.
that's my question.
Okay. So there's a couple of things you need to be aware of here. All right. The first thing is what you're referring to is a copy. All right. So Lightroom will recognize an image wherever you place it on your system. It will recognize the image that it's going to be working with. So that would be your primary image. Okay. And any changes you make within Lightroom, it's going to make it to that primary image. All right. Of course, it would be nice to have a backup of that primary image in a different location should something happen to the image, your primary image. Okay. So now let's remove Lightroom out of the equation. Okay. You have a group of images, you shot some photos, you placed them on your hard drive, let's say your C drive. Okay. You also have an external drive, we'll call it the D drive, that you can plug in anytime. Okay. That's your backup. So in order to make a backup, all we're doing is we're creating a copy of our primary images and putting it on the D drive, right?
Yes.
Okay. Two separate drives, same exact files. So if something happens to the files in one, you have a backup in the second. Okay. Now let's bring Lightroom back into the equation. Okay. Lightroom recognizes all the primary files. It doesn't know anything about the images in the D drive. It could care less about the images in the D drive because those are duplicates of what's your primary. Okay. The sole purpose of that D drive is in case anything happens in the primary, you can replicate the file in the primary, right? All you got to do is grab it from here, copy it to here, and you're back in order.
Okay.
All right. And Lightroom will now see that you're back in order.
Okay.
Follow?
Yes.
Okay. So for that respect, Lightroom doesn't care about that secondary drive because it's not going to catalog it. It's not going to do anything with it. All right. There's no need to. You have the original image in the main catalog. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So any existing images currently in the system that have not been backed up, it's very simple. You just, through your File Explorer, take those images, make a copy to your secondary drive.
Okay, this person
Okay.
was looking not to do File Explorer. I always do File Explorer, so she wanted to do it in Lightroom.
No,
You
can't do it. No,
Okay.
because like
Alright.
so for the specific reason that Lightroom doesn't care about that secondary drive.
Okay.
All right, hold on, I'm not finished yet. Okay, that's for existing files. Okay, existing files. All right,
Mhm.
but now, of course, tomorrow I'm going to go and shoot something else. I'm going to take 100 pictures. Okay, I want to now correct the problem of putting images into that secondary drive. All right. I don't want to have to do this as a separate event all the time. All right.
Mhm.
So now I'm going to ask Lightroom to help me in that task. Okay. And this is how we do it. In Lightroom, all right, and I have some images that I took over the weekend of the eagles at Shopog Dam. So I'm going to plug it into my system through my card reader, okay? And I'm going to go import, and here is my import dialog box. All right, got some older images, but here are the photos, okay? And by default, the way I have my system set up is that it ingests all the images into my main catalog. Okay? And it puts it on my main drive. Okay? Follow?
Yes.
Okay. So now what I'm going to ask Lightroom to do is every time I bring those images into the Lightroom catalog onto my system, I also want to do an extra task. And that task is to go ahead and make a copy to the D drive. All right.
Okay.
So obviously that D drive needs to be plugged in. All right.
Mhm.
And if we go, all right, to the left-hand side here, and
Mhm.
oh, what the heck?
Oh, okay. I see that.
Right. Okay. So if we go to here to file handling, all right, you can see that right here. Let me zoom in. Make a second copy to.
Okay.
All right. So you have to make sure that that is checked. All right. And then if you click here, all right, you tell it where you want to put those, second ones. Okay.
Mhm.
Wherever it is that your backup images go to. Okay.
Okay.
And now what happens is and like I've said before, once you set these settings, Lightroom will remember those settings the next time around. So you click on that today, the next time you import, it's going to remember that setting and it's going to send it. The only thing you have to remember is if it's a secondary drive that you can unplug, make sure that it's plugged in every time you import images. Okay.
Okay.
So you click on that, designate where you want it to go, hit import, and it's done.
Good. Thank you.
All right. So if you make that part of your workflow, then by all means. Now, there's a caveat to this. A caveat. All right. Actually, let me go back to the import dialog box here. Okay. All right. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see. Let me expand this. Okay. All right. See these three, this one, and this one. So underexposed. Okay. I have some images here that are probably like really fuzzy and out of focus. All right. Out of all of these images, I'm probably going to dump and delete for one reason or another. Let's say I delete 10% of them, 20% of them, whatever it is. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm deleting them from my main drive, my primary drive. They are not being deleted from the backup drive.
I understand that because
Okay.
I work this way with File Manager.
Right. So now you got to ask yourself, okay, do I want the backup drive to reflect the fact that I got rid of all these kind of useless images? Like I've mentioned before, I carry my camera on a cross strap, and the camera sits right at my waist pointing down, and I'll come home with 3, 4, or 5 pictures of the sidewalk. Do I want those in my backup drive? Not really. All they're doing is taking up space, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to ask yourself, all right, when I'm done with my workflow in Lightroom, do I now want to update and have the backup reflect those changes? Okay. And then at that point, you can say, okay, well, I'm just going to go delete the images that need to be deleted. All right. Takes up a little bit of time. Or you can say, okay, I'm not going to do my backup on the ingest. I will do it after the fact. Okay. So I've brought in all the images. I've sorted them out. I've dumped 20% of them. I have my keepers. I have my seconds. Okay. So out of 100 pictures, I'm keeping 80 of them. All right.
Yes.
In my backup drive, if I do it on ingest, I'm going to have 100 images. 20 of them are worthless.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Or I can say, I'm just going to bring them into my primary drive. Once I'm done editing, I'm going to, in my workflow, I'm going to separate my keepers in one folder from my seconds in a second folder.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I've done the separation of the two sets in my primary drive. So once I'm done editing, I can then say my workflow is not finished until I've copied those two files to my backup drive. And now my backup drive is going to have 80 sorted images.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But it's got to be worked into your workflow. And you have to remember when you're done in Lightroom to go ahead and copy those images.
In File Manager.
And in File Manager, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, there's a couple considerations. It depends on what the needs are.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So hopefully that answers the question and gives you something to think about.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right. Does it answer your question?
That answers my
Okay.
question. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Okay. That's a great question. So, all right. Anybody else?
Yeah, Doc, I got on Photoshop. I've been trying to find how I can eliminate telephone lines from one spot, and then that would be like shift and then click on the other end of the telephone line, and it disappears entirely. Can't seem to find.
Okay. Let me see if I have anything with power lines. Do I have anything with power lines? I'm not finding anything with power lines. Give me 1 second. What do I got? Power lines, anything? Of course, when you need something, you can't, right? All right, well, here's all right, let me open this image in Photoshop. It's not power lines, but they are
So that green pole, that'd be same thing.
yeah. So we have this pole here. I say I want to get rid of it. Okay. Obviously, the easiest way to do it is to go to your content aware brush, right? The spot healing brush. Okay. And you're going to make it a little bit bigger. All right. In this case, I'm going to make it a hard, let me go, hard round brush. All right. Come on. And I'm going to give it about 80% feather. Okay. And you're going to want to make it to just a little bit larger than what you need. All right. All right. And you're going to tap once up at the top, holding the shift key down to the bottom. Oh, wait a minute. What happened? It moved from my, there we go. Tap once at the top, shift tap on the bottom. Okay. And let me zoom in. And you can see that, wow, didn't quite do it. Okay. Why is that? Well, unfortunately, the way all of these content aware things work, whether you're doing a content aware fill with a selection or whether you're doing a content aware spot removal with a brush, it's using the artificial intelligence. And we are, in a sense, we are telling Photoshop what we want removed. Okay, but we also have to give it a little bit more information. Photoshop needs to know what are we going to replace it with. So what it needs to do is analyze the area around your selection. Okay. So for example, let me just undo that what I just did. Okay. And let me just do a selection. Okay. If I select just along that line and ask it to do a fill, all right, we are telling this is what we need to fill, but we're not telling what we want it filled with. Okay. So in order to be more effective, we need to go outside of and give a little bit more room to our selection. Okay. So as it analyzes it, it says, okay, we have a lot of green along the outside border, but there's this brown spot. All right. And it's going to say, all right, that brown spot is the area that's different than everything else around it. So now we've told it what it needs to remove and what it's going to be filling it with. All right. Because we've expanded that selection to include what we want to use to replace the brown with. Follow?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's with a selection. With a brush, like the spot healing brush, the brush has a feather to it. All right. And we apply a feather in order for it to give us a soft blend to the edges of whatever work we're doing. So if we're doing dodging and burning, we don't want a hard edge to our dodge and burn because it makes it obvious, right? We want a nice soft feather so that the edges blend in and we don't perceive that transition. Okay, it's the same thing when we're doing these kinds of fixes. We need to allow for that feathering, so our brush needs to not only accommodate the feathering of the brush, but it also needs to accommodate the information that Photoshop needs to understand this is what we are replacing with. So now I have a much bigger brush. Okay, I'm going to tap at the top, shift tap at the bottom, and now it's done a much better job. Okay, as previously, and then we just do it again. Okay, now hopefully that made sense. Okay, now here is where it gets complicated. I love frying brains. This is where it gets complicated. Okay. Brushes have certain attributes that we can apply to them. Okay. One of the attributes that we can apply is a tapering. So if we're using something like a pen, we can use pressure to alter the size of our brush. Make sense? Okay. So if I have a brush that allows me to taper and this one doesn't, all right, what happens is if I tap at the top, shift tap at the bottom, if the brush has a taper, it's going to default to the smallest size. So even though your brush size may look large, the taper function may tell it that it's actually small. All right. And when that happens, you totally miss everything and, you know, it's never going to look right. So that's something you have to watch out for when you're using a brush for your content aware blemish removal. Okay. Did that answer your question?
90%. The problem I'm having is like the phone line or the power line has like a sway in it.
Oh,
And
yep.
so it does, when you click from both ends, it goes straight across.
Yes. Okay. So, you know what? I'm going to, let's do this. Let me do this. Black. Oh, that's too small. What do we got? Oh, I'm at 10%. That's why. Okay, let me make it. There we go. Okay, there's my power line. Okay. I want to remove it. Huh?
Smiley face.
Smiley face, yeah. All right, so I'm going to select my brush, and I'm going to make sure that I am slightly larger. Okay, and this is a brush that I made, so I know it does not have taper to it. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to quickly go through this as fast as I can, all right, without having to draw it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap, 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 tap along the way. And I'm going to keep my finger on the shift key. So I tap once at the beginning of the line, okay? Now I press and hold the shift key and I go down, I go down, I go down, all right, down, all right, and it's going to make a mess, okay? And we start the process over again. Okay. Oh, that's not what we want. All right. Oh, when I'm pressing the wrong button. That's what I get for not looking at my keyboard. All right. And I may take a couple of passes. All right. to fix. And it's probably doing a worse job because I'm on a separate layer. Okay. So it's really struggling with the fact that I'm working on a separate layer. But that's basically how you would do it, is you would just go small increments along that curve. All right. So now what happens is it introduces an issue for Photoshop. Okay. Let me just make a line. All right. I'm just going to make a line. Okay. All right. And all right. So now I tap on the beginning. All right. And all this does is it puts a location on the image of where the cursor is. All right. Even though I'm moving the cursor, the last spot that made contact with the image is still in that end of that line. Okay. Make sense? Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to tell Photoshop where the end of our line is going to be. All right. So we press and hold the shift key. All right. It's recognizing this as the beginning. That's where we touched. All right. And I can go and click here. All right. At the end. And it's going to do a much better job. All right. Not a perfect job, but a much better job. All right. Let me undo that. And the reason being is because we've encompassed the entire line with that brush. So like I said before, the brush tells Photoshop what we want to remove and what we want to replace the removal with. All right. So the area being covered by the brush has to have all that information. When we go in steps, all right, click here, shift, click here, okay. Notice where the center of our cursor is, all right. So when I let go, all right, it's butting up against a line. All right. So now we're confusing Photoshop and saying, well, we're not completely encompassing everything. All right. On the other end, I'm seeing this line. So it's assuming that it's going to use part of that line in its replacement. And this is where, you know, the AI fails a little bit because it's misinterpreting our intention. Okay. So now what we have to do is we have to go click at the where it just ended where it's correct and shift click further down, go back, shift click, go back, shift click, go back, shift click. All right. So you can see now we're getting a little bit better success. All right. Not perfect, but a better success because we're now going backwards over what the AI did and saying, and letting the AI know, no, that's not what I wanted. We got to get rid of this. Okay. Whereas previously, let me just undo all that. Previously, if I just do a click, shift, click, shift, click, shift, click, shift, click, shift, click, shift, click, it doesn't know what it's got to do because we're clicking along a path that's supposed to be part of what is filling in. All right. It's not quite encompassing everything. All right. I know it complicates things a little bit. All right. But once we understand the limitations of the tool, we can work around that limitation. All right. So usually what we'll do is we'll just do a large section, okay, and then do another large section until we've gotten rid of it. There's no easy fix, okay? So
Also, you're using 80%. Is there any reason why you would not use 100%?
80% on what? Oh, on the on my edge.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're gonna go here. Let's go with a. Actually, yeah. So we go. Where is it? 100%. So complete hard edge. Let me. Oh yeah. Actually, let me do this so that it crosses from the green into the dirt. That might be a little bit better. Okay. So I have now 100% hardness on it. Okay. All right. Yeah. No, actually, it doesn't look like it's. Yeah. No, it looks fine. I don't know. I think it's just personal preference. It's something that I got used to a long time ago, with when these tools were not as smart, when we had to use the clone stamp tool. All right. When when you're using a clone stamp tool, it makes it a little bit more obvious. All right. So if I zoom in here. All right, you can see that hard edge. All right, see that hard edge there?
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully you can see it. Okay. That's why I got so used to just giving it that kind of like soft edge, because now, actually, let me make it even softer. All right, there we go. If I zoom in here, let's see, zoom here. All right, see, you really can't see that edge transition there. It's less obvious.
Yep.
Okay, that's why. All right, it's just a personal leftover from earlier versions of Photoshop. So, okay. But it's, I keep it, whenever I do any kind of retouching, I want that soft transition, and I find that 80% gives you just enough of a soft transition that is going to give you what looks like a defined edge without being a defined edge, a hard, sharp edge. Okay. When I'm doing soft blends, I want a softer brush. When I want a hard edge, I usually go up to 80% and no further, because a true hard edge in Photoshop looks strange. Okay, so hopefully you understand my justification. It's just a handle, hang on. All right, so.
Duck, I have a follow-up question to what you were just doing here.
Okay.
In Lightroom, isn't that the brush, the way it works, that it's sort of free form, and then once you're done drawing the shape that you want to clean up, it calculates what, gives you a choice of where it would like to pull that fix from, and then you can move that around. Does Photoshop do something like that as well, or is that?
Yeah.
Because it seemed like what he was trying to solve, that in Lightroom, if you drew one of those lines along the offending telephone line, then it might, choose a part of sky next door and say, here, use this. And
Okay. Well, it kind of depends on the complexity of the scene around what it is that you're trying to remove. Okay.
Right.
So obviously the content aware spot healing brush, uh, that tends to be my go-to because I find 90% of the time it does a decent job. Yeah, I may have to brush over it a couple of times to fix up some of the flaws, but overall, it does a really good job. But that's not the only tool we have available to us, okay? We have the patch tool, which kind of works along the same line of what happens in Lightroom, all right? So in Lightroom, we will draw the patch with a brush, okay? In Photoshop, we'll draw it with a lasso, okay? And once we have that lasso selection, then we can take that and move it wherever we want to sample from, all right? And it's going to use that sample, okay? Now, here I'm using a fairly, oops, let's make it a little bit better here. I'm using this on a background that is very simple, okay? Being able to make my selections is super easy because there's not a lot of clutter. All right, so it makes the tool doesn't have to work very hard. Okay. Let's say, okay, so let me draw a line here. Okay. Now, if I want to use that tool, all right, it's going to be a little trickier because now I have to be careful of how I make my initial selection, all right? And I have to be careful where I sample from, all right? So actually, let me undo this, okay? Let's say I wanted to do the whole line all in one shot, okay? What are the chances of me being able to find a spot that perfectly matches this selection within some other part of this image? Okay. Typically, we'll go to one side or the other of our selection, right? So in this case, the obvious positions would be directly above or directly below because we have a kind of a horizontal form, all right? But it's not going to be 100% perfect, okay? Does a decent job, okay? Not 100% perfect. I can see some artifacting going on that I will now need to correct in order to make it look better, okay? But what I find is most of the time you're going to be making these corrections anyway, no matter how you do it. All right. So if I go downwards, okay. All right. Oh, that's even worse. I can definitely notice the edge on that one. Let me see if I can zoom in. Yeah. See the edges? Hopefully that comes across on the screen. All right. But I can very definitely see where I made my selection. So going below it was actually worse. Okay. So what happens is when we make a full selection, all right, we can't, unless we're working with something like the lower section where it's fairly even textured all around it, where the texture doesn't matter, that's easy. All right. And here we have a complex background with a lot of different colors, a lot of different textures. We now have to take it in smaller steps. So now we have to do a little bit more thinking and say, okay, well, we have this section of blue and green at the very beginning. So maybe I'll just take that selection and I'll sample from maybe down here. All right. And the nice thing is that it allows you to kind of sort of preview what the correction is going to be that's going to get applied. And obviously there's going to be a little bit of blending going on when you release it, but you can sort of gauge where your fix is going to be. Okay. All right. And if you notice, all right, because I took it in a small section, it's attached to that line. So it thinks that line is also part of the correction. That's why you see it encroaching on within the inside of my selection. It's the same issue we had earlier with the brush. This is the way the AI thinks. All right. So now we just take it and go to the next section. And that one is into this white here. All right. That did a pretty decent job. All right. And all I'm doing with this is avoiding that repetition of pattern by you know, our eyes are very used to finding repetition of patterns whenever we look at something. It's part of the Gestalt theory of human vision. If you've listened to my lecture on you know, going beyond the rule of thirds, this is part of it. Okay, we want to find patterns. Patterns jump out very, very clearly. So by taking it in small steps, we are disturbing that pattern making. All right. We are, or not disturbing, we are avoiding that pattern making. All right. Control D. All right. Go to the next section, find something that works right about, probably about there. All right. This section here, maybe down here. Oh, didn't work. Maybe there. There we go. All right. So small little steps, slow and easy wins the day. Okay. But this is where understanding what, oh, see, now we got a little repetition of pattern. Now I have to go back and kind of sort of fix that. All right. And we have some artifacting. There we go. Okay. So understanding what the limitations of the tool are just as important as understanding what the tool does. All right. So hopefully that made sense. Yes? Okay. All right. And then of course, if we turn it off and on, actually did a pretty decent job. Okay.
They've
All right.
got red eye reduction. We want a telephone line, electric line, AI, fix it.
You know, I'm sure there's something out there along that way.
The
Yeah.
right action.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Luminar Neo has it.
yeah, I won't doubt it. I won't doubt it at all.
I used it quite a bit. Works great.
Yep. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Filters, as
Filters.
in camera filters, lens filters.
Okay.
I just got I got a new camera, and
Oh.
it came with a new lens, and it's one of the lenses is a 55 to 300 telephoto, and it looks like these two lenses fit on that, or these two filters fit on that lens, and I'm wondering what they might be used for. One of them says it's a Vivitar Series 1 FLD.
Okay.
It looks kind of red. And then the other one is a CPL Series 1 Vivitar.
Yeah. CPL circular polarizer. All right. And there should be two parts to that. One rotates against the other.
Okay. I just noticed. Okay, so that's a pull. All right.
Yep. So the way the polarizer works is that you rotate one piece of the filter against the other piece of the filter, and it polarizes the light coming in. All right. So what that means is there's a couple things. All right. Incident light coming from the light source. All right. So like the sun coming through our atmosphere, all right, tends to get scattered. All right. And what the polarizer will do is it will polarize, meaning it will kind of like straighten out the particles of light instead of being cast all over the place. It kind of arranges it more into a linear format. Not quite. I'm kind of like oversimplifying this. All right. But what happens is it reduces a lot of the glare. All right. And what you'll find is you'll get a little bit more vibrant colors in the sky. And the sky will also darken down a little bit. Okay. Where the polarizer comes in and shines really, really well is with other polarized light. Okay. What happens is whenever light hits a reflective surface, some of the light goes through the surface, some of the light bounces back. All right. And what it does is it tends to polarize it. All right. And what the polarizer does is that light that is being reflected off the surface of the water, all right, which is polarized, is creating a glare on the surface. So that's all the camera sees is this glare just hitting it in its face. Okay. So and it's polarized. All right. So let's simplify it. Let's say the light is coming like this. Okay. When we put a polarizer on our lens, think of it as having like a grid. All right. If the polarizer grid is like this and the light that's coming at it is like this, it's just going to go through, right? Right through. Now, if we take the polarizer and we do this to it, all right, what's going to happen is it's going to come like this, and a lot of it is going to get blocked. That polarized light's not going to reach the sensor. That's that reflected light coming straight at from whatever's reflected. All right, so we can rotate that circular polarizer to reduce that glare, and now suddenly we're able to see the water or what's in the water, obviously depending on how clear the water is. Okay. The same thing with reflective surfaces like glass and buildings. All right. Architects will use a polarized filter because the angle of incident, angle of reflection, you get the sun bouncing off a piece of glass straight at the lens. Okay. It's coming at you polarized. We turn the filter and we're blocking that polarized light by going a counter polarization to block that light. And the only light that's coming in is the light, the normal light. Okay. Again, oversimplified, but hopefully that kind of gives you an understanding of what the polarizer is doing. All right. And the other one was, what was it?
FLD. FLD. And it's kind of a reddish tint to it.
All right. I think, let me look that up real quick.
I think that's fluorescent. The old fluorescent filter. I think.
Yeah, it might be. Let's see. Yes, fluorescent light, daylight, fluorescent light, daylight. Okay, so all that does is the red tint neutralizes the green. All right, so let me go to
I mean,
Oh,
and they were pretty much for
I know
film
what.
cameras as opposed to our digital with auto white balance.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was, and really my follow-up question is, do we really need, I can appreciate a polarizing filter, I've used them, but like this other one here, would I ever need it really with
Okay.
the way it started it?
There's two schools of thought on that one. All right. So this is my color wheel. All right.
Mm-hmm.
The green cyan down at the bottom here. Here we go. Here we go. Green cyan. Excuse me. Fluorescent light tends to have a cast, meaning there's a slight tint of this. All right. If we look at the opposite side, where are we? There we go. All right. The opposite of that red, of that green is this red color. Okay. So whenever we put the opposite of a color, it neutralizes it. All right. So it negates it. Okay. It neutralizes it. All right. So by putting that filter on when you're shooting indoors in fluorescent light, it will color correct to a certain degree the greenish tint that you would normally get with a fluorescent light. Okay. All right. So I'll give you the two schools of thought. All right. One is if you can do it in camera, it gives you a better color profile when you take the picture. All right, because you've corrected for whatever issues are out in the field, you've corrected it at the picture taking, and it's supposedly going to give you a better digital negative. Okay, so that's one school of thought. The other school of thought is, oh my God, Lightroom and Photoshop and all these other programs are so good at neutralizing color casts that it makes these filters obsolete. Okay? That's my school of thought. All right, is the software is so good when you're shooting raw. The software is so good at controlling these color casts that we really have no need for these types of filters. Okay? So it all depends on what your preference is. Like I said, me personally, you know me, I like to make things as easy as possible for myself. Okay? And if I'm photographing an event or you know, on location shot, and especially if I'm bouncing between indoor and outdoor, I don't want to be having to take a filter on and off my camera all the time. Oh, I'm shooting indoors. Let me put this thing on. Oh, I got to run outside and get a couple of shots outside. Oh, I got to take that filter off. Oh, we're back inside. Got to put that filter back on. Too much work.
And you're also adding extra glass.
And yes, absolutely. I forgot about that. Some people say, well, we're putting another piece of glass in between, you know, the object and our sensor. Okay. We already have, you know, depending on the lens you have, may have 7 to 9 elements. That's 7 to 9 pieces of glass. It's already going through. All right. You're going to add another one. Okay. So, and not only that, another one that has a color hue to it that cuts down on some of the light. So, all right. So, two schools of thought. All right. Me, like I said, I like to keep things simple. If there's any color casts, I just use the eyedropper tool and I get rid of that color cast.
So I used to use it when I was shooting the 35mm slide. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Yes.
With the digital stuff, forget it.
Correct. Shooting film, it's a needed element because you cannot, it's very difficult to correct for any color cast in analog film. Okay. And they actually had very specific filters for black and white film and other filters that were just for color film, so but yes, absolutely, analog film, totally different animal. You need to get that right in camera because you couldn't do it in post. There was no Photoshop for post. Okay.
Well, like I said, I acquired this camera used, and it came with a bunch of stuff. So
Yeah.
sounds like something I can put in the back of the shelf. I won't
So
need to take it.
all right.
Just wanted to make sure I didn't have my hands on something hot there.
No. Okay. So here's this is probably wrong of me to say, but it's probably the truth. More than likely what happened is that a salesman saw somebody with money who knew nothing and upsold them to a bunch of crap. Oh, well, you're going to need this filter, if you're going to shoot indoors, because, this filter cuts off all the green from the fluorescent light. You need this filter, all right? Oh, you need this filter if you're going to, be shooting glass and water and things like that. You need this filter, okay? So obviously the salesman saw that person coming, especially
Yeah,
with
sounds about right. Yeah,
yeah.
worked out to my benefit.
Hey, but the thing is that FDL or FLD is going to probably sit in a drawer and gather dust. Or you can sell it on eBay for $5.
Oh, boy.
You know, my real estate lawyer told me one time. He said it's a salesman's job to take your money away
Yes. That's why I could never be a salesman. I that is such a predatory feeling. I feel icky when I do sales.
Oh, I auditioned for, and then I told him, I got a health problem. I can't take this job. It was for Life Touch, and it was for taking free pictures of people in a church or a church basement for a church directory.
Mm-hmm.
So the family comes in for a free photo. You take their picture, and then you have to sell them. And it's like, I felt like a whore.
Yeah.
I can say this on the recording, and to do this in a church.
Yeah.
It just hit me the wrong way.
Yeah, that's why I like commercial photography, because I'm selling something that's needed.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to upsell something that somebody doesn't need. So I don't get that icky feeling when I sell photography, because when I do commercial photography, I'm listening to what the client's needs are, and I say, okay, this is what I'm going to provide. It's going to cost me this much. There it is. Okay. And they know what they're paying, they know what they're getting, and I know what I'm delivering, so yeah. That's why if I were to do retail photography, you know portraits and stuff, I like selling packages, because the price, what you're getting, and I know what I'm delivering. There's no upselling. There's no, um, there's no, you don't get that underhanded manipulation feeling. Oh yeah, I'll shoot your photos for free, and then I'll try to sell you $1,000 worth of crap that you may or may not need. I don't get it. But it is a business model. Some people, are very successful with that business model. That's why I can't work for Life Touch. So, all right. That was a good discussion, though. So, So good luck with your camera.
Yes, I'm excited. And it turns out the camera I got is, am I muted?
No, yeah, I can hear you.
The camera I have, it's like an entry level, for someone who's starting to get serious, it's a good entry level camera. And actually that worked out for me because when you start looking at these things, a lot of folks end up like, you just described, and they tend to have a low shot count.
Yeah.
I started looking for maybe a higher end, more professional one, but I go, well, if a pro owns this and he's dumping it, then it's going to have a significant more.
Yeah.
shot
Oh
count.
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
and I can barely handle this thing, so I figure I'm really happy with the way it worked out. So.
Which camera is it?
This is the Nikon D5300.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, decent camera. Yeah.
And this time it came with the two lenses. I had just the one lens before.
Yeah.
So now I have a stronger telephoto.
Hey.
Awesome.
Oh, hey, I have a question for Bill. When we were talking about the polarizing lens, will that come in handy if you're out shooting automobiles?
It has for me, yeah. What I will do is I will I will look at an automobile with the polarizer lens, and then I will turn it to how I want to get rid of the reflection. I'm looking at the reflection either in the windshield or on the car or both, and I turn it and I decide where I want to have it.
Yeah. You'll be able to see the effect through the lens. But here's the thing is, all right, depending on the angle of the reflection is going to determine the angle of polarization. So a circular filter may be able to filter out one, but not the other. All right. And that's where Bill says you kind of need to determine where you're going to remove the glare from. Because obviously, depending on the angle of the windshield, all right, that's going to be different than the angle of the hood. So when it polarizes that light, it's going to polarize it at two different angles. So
it's hit and miss. I decide how I want it.
Yeah.
I play with the polarizer and I decide how I want it. Do you remember Donna? She has since moved away. She came to a couple of our sessions. Duck, you helped her with her camera. Then she went in with Jesse. She and I went to a workshop, and the person said, take 4 pictures and turn the polarizer every quarter.
yeah,
it didn't work for me. It did not work for me.
No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, because if you turn it a quarter and it's not lined up to block whatever light, what's the sense of taking it? All right, you have to look through and actually see what light is being blocked. Take a photo, then rotate it for the other surface. Take a photo for that, and then you can do a blend.
Okay.
All right,
Oh,
but this blind rotation, no, that's garbage.
Mm-hmm.
That's garbage. All right, it's just the same with doing like exposure stacking. All right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A lot of people will do what's called a blind exposure stack. All right, they set their camera to three exposures at two stops apart. All right, and then just go click, click, click. All right, well, what did you take a photo of? All right, did you get a proper exposure for your highlights? Did you get a proper exposure for the shadows? Or were those two just guesses? And more often than not, those two tend to be guesses. All right. So a better way to do it is to meter for your highlights, meter for your shadows. Okay. Find the middle, and that's where you set your exposure. All right. And then calculate how many stops apart from the middle that is. It's a little bit more time consuming, but you're going to get better results rather than doing it blind.
Okay.
I don't know if I lost you on that one.
No, you didn't. I get the idea.
Okay.
That's going to take some time to practice.
Yes.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Instead of just the, okay, 0 minus 2 plus
Right,
0,
right,
0
right.
minus 3 plus
Right.
3, which is what how most people usually teach it.
Right. Right. I learned that technique from Pat Cook a long time ago, and his HDR stuff was phenomenal, and it's because he took the time to calculate what the proper exposure was for his bracket rather than doing it blind. You know, and obviously, HDR photography software has gotten so much better. But there are other ways of being able to do an exposure blend in Photoshop without having to do, going through the HDR tool. You can do exposure blends with masks, so anyway. So, all right, guys, any other questions? Maureen's been kind of quietly working on her stuff and listening. Any questions?
You just said something about HDR, and I'm woefully behind it on what really it is. But it sounds like there's multiple exposures that get blended together.
Correct.
But without going into it, on my phone sometimes when I take a picture, it just says HDR enabled. So does he did he take a number of pictures, or did he just run some software and make it look like HDR? Or
yeah, the cell phone HDR works a little different, but it works more like the newer mirrorless cameras do with the Olympus. With the there's a term for their technology where it's recording the exposure, okay? And when the exposure, all right, so the analogy of pouring water into a bucket goes back, decades for teaching how, the exposure sensor works, okay? Not quite like that, okay? But as you're pouring water in, all right, if you have a lot of water, it's going to fill up that bucket a lot faster than if you have a little bit of water. Okay? So if you have a big bucket and you have a little bucket, okay? And you're pouring the water both at the same time. All right? So the same not the same amount is going out, but the same volume is going out, okay? The volume of the bigger bucket is going to fill it up faster than the volume of the little bucket when you're pouring at the same rate, okay? So what happens is bright spots tend to get overexposed because it's being left open longer to compensate for the shadows, okay? And that's where we get clipping. All right, so what, I don't know if this is exactly how the technology worked, but this is my guess as to how it is, all right? So in order to control that, when the exposure of the bright spots reach a certain level, it stops, okay? Actually, it's the other way around. When the exposure of the shadow areas reach a certain level, it stops and waits for the light to catch up, all right? So this is in low light situations, and the light painting stuff, okay? So that way you're not overexposing the shadow area as you're waiting for the bright areas to gain their proper exposure. Okay, so it's doing this HDR blend in camera without the need of taking multiple shots. So it's basically saying, all right, the dark pixels, we're not gonna expose for those dark pixels anymore. We're just gonna wait on the bright pixels. Okay, I don't know how they do this, but it's magic, and it allows you to do a 30-second exposure without really blowing out your shadows. It's friggin' awesome. All right. So I'm sure the cell phones have the same technology, but when it uses that, it will let you know, it'll label that file as HDR, because that's basically what it is. It's an exposure blend between the shadows and the highlights, so that it wrangles the shadows while it also wrangles the highlights without getting blown out. So, okay. I'm sorry, Maureen, you were going to say something.
No, I've just been listening.
Oh, okay. All right. Anytime you got a question, you can ask, right?
Okay.
Don't be shy. Okay, good. All right. Gloria had a question, and I actually asked her to wait for next month because it has to do with colors, color cards, and color calibration. So I think what we'll do is next month we'll delve into color calibration a little bit on that. Okay. So I hope you don't mind, Gloria, because
It's okay.
I can gloss over it and give you the answer, but it's a good topic to really delve in a little bit more deeper into it. So, okay.
Thank you, Doc.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions, guys? All right. There's really not much going on right now. Personally, my time's been kind of taken up with some client work and looking for a new studio space. So if anybody knows of a suitable building somewhere along the Route 8 corridor between Torrington and Naugatuck.
Eastern?
Easton's a little bit too far out. I want to keep it kind of along that Route 8 corridor. Because the wife wants to move. And
Your wife wants to move out of Shelton?
yeah, her daughter lives in Harwington, and
Okay.
she's got an in-law apartment, and it's waiting for us. So she
That is a distance away. You know what? We could talk later. Arlington, well, it is a little distant. Never mind. I was going to say there are some old factories in Plainville, but Harwinton's a little too far. Never mind.
yeah, I probably as far as going eastward, I think Bristol will probably be the furthest east I go.
You should be able to find something in Waterbury, Watertown.
Yeah.
You should be
Well, if I go into Waterbury, I got to watch out what area it's in, obviously.
yeah, I know.
So what was the north and south cities you said? Torrington to where?
Torrington to Naugatuck.
Okay.
Simply because I do have a lot of clients down in this area that I still need to service. But if I keep it along the Route 8 corridor, at least it's easy to travel. Right now, from Shelton to Harwington, door to door, it's about 40 minutes, roughly. So it's not too bad,
Did you sell your house yet?
Oh God, no, not yet.
Okay.
But yeah, so I've been looking for studio space, and it's tough because there's very little available.
Try, there is an old factory in Oakville on 63, an old factory building, but I don't know if there's a photographer in there.
Yeah, so
Would you want to be in a place where there's a photographer?
Yeah, I don't care.
Out
There's
there?
there's a photographer in my building here.
Hey, you know what? Look, you know who to talk to? Talk to Tom Hill. I went to high school with him. His phone number is, if it's 203.
Wait. Let's send me his phone number later.
Okay. It's 203-755 Hill. His last name.
You just, you know, oh my God, Bill.
Now you gotta take that out of the recording.
Now I gotta edit it. Yeah, damn it.
Sorry. No, this was not a free plug. Tom Hill Real Estate, commercial real estate in Waterbury.
Okay, well,
You know, I just thought this.
is that a work number?
That's a work.
Okay, I'll leave the work number. All
Okay,
right, okay.
Okay.
But I don't want to be doxing anybody because this video is being recorded and it's going to YouTube after,
Okay.
you know. All right. So I'll look him up. But anyway, so my attention's been with that. CTPPA has been doing their monthly events. We just did the Shawpog Dam Eagles. We were there. There were 2 eagles, an adult and a youngling. That youngling was like on the other side of the river, way upstream. It was just a little speck. The other one was a little bit closer to us, but it kind of stayed on the far bank in the trees. So
Just a little bit bigger speck.
just a little bit. You can very clearly see his head, blazing white in all that brown.
That is a tough place to find to shoot when you find them.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be better than that. I've never been there before. So it was a little bit of a learning experience. But the Connecticut Audubon came in with some birds of prey. They had a barn owl, they had a hoot owl, a screech owl rather, and they had a I can't remember what type of falcon. So we got to take some up, not a falcon, hawk. Yes, thank you, hawk. So we were able to get some up close and personal images. So that was kind of nice. But anyway, I don't know what next month's event is going to be. I'll have to look it up and I'll let you guys know. But what is coming up in March, for those of you who are interested, is CTPPA's 74th annual conference. It's 3 days. I think the conference is actually 2 days with 1 day pre-conference stuff. All kinds of learning events. I think there's going to be vendors there as well. I'll be doing a presentation at this year's event. It's March 24th, 25th, and 26th. Up in, actually, I think I had the page here. Let me see, where is it? Here it is. In Windsor, the Hilton Garden Inn in Windsor, right here. So if you guys are interested in attending the conference, just go to the ctppa.com. Go to the events page, events, and click on events, and it'll bring you to this page right here. Okay. So anyway, that's my plug for. Anyway. If there are no further questions, I really appreciate you hanging out with me. Let's see. I don't have anything prepped for next week. So, but, and in February, it's a short month, so I definitely won't have anything. But I'll see if I can get a Patreon only event for March. We'll see. Oh no, it's going to interfere with with
We
the
have,
conference?
we have a fourth and a fifth Monday, so it's, we'll be meeting again in 3 weeks.
Oh, okay. So maybe I'll put together a Patreon event for one of those extra Mondays. So awesome. All right, guys. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. If you're a Patreon, I gratefully appreciate your support. It helps, put these things together for you. All right. Hopefully, once I do find a space, I'm hoping that, I can work it so it doesn't disrupt our Monday night get-togethers, because I really enjoy this. All right. So in the meantime, stay safe, keep clicking away, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.